Welcome to Chapter 3, Weather and Gears in the Himalayan webinar series. In previous chapter, we discussed about diverse terrains, landscapes you will come across when hiking the high passes of the Himalayas. In this chapter, we'll be focusing on the gears required to traverse these terrains, as well as keep yourself safe from high altitude weather conditions. We will still have 4 additional chapters following to this, which will also highlight gears. One is food and shelter, which requires a dedicated module. Alpine style hiking, showing the differences between independent hiking versus commercial group hiking. One dedicated chapter to maps and navigation, which is definitely a must for the independent hiker who wants to find his own way in the remote corners of the planet. And then a chapter dedicated to fast hiking and minimalism. Here you can see my gear set of last summer when I crossed 120 high passes across Uttarakhand, Himachal and Ladakh, going up to 6,150 meter altitude. Gear set is quite compact and minimalist compared to the average Himalayan hiker, which will easily slog along a 60-liter backpack weighing more than 25 kilograms, compared to my rather compact gear set here weighing only 4 kilograms. Topics in this module, we'll first have a look at different aspects of high altitude weather. Shoe wear extremely important given the challenging terrain. Clothing, technical gears required to overcome specific challenging terrains. Acclimatization required at high altitudes. Not less important is, of course, electronics and power for modern day GPS-based navigation. And then finally, a few words on the financial aspects of independent hiking. When we talk about weather tends to become more extreme as you go to higher altitudes, where a little bit of rain and a light breeze would be comfortable on a beach at sea level. The same rain, the same wetness and wind could be fatal, could be leading to hyperthermia at very high altitudes. So in addition to being more extreme, the weather also tends to change rapidly at those high altitudes, especially when you cross the high passes at 4,000 or 5,000 meters. The weather conditions can change very fast, so we will typically cross passes in the early morning when we have a stable weather window and avoid late afternoon crossings when weather can change very fast from a blue sunny sky to very bad weather conditions. Another aspect is that you're sometimes hiking at higher altitudes, say above 4,000 meters in Ladakh, Zanskar, which more than heat will mean that due to the thin climates, you will get exposed to intense UV rays. So again, winds, rains, whiteouts also, where suddenly you will be surrounded by dense fog and basically lose complete visibility, making it quite easy for you to miss the trail and much harder to navigate. With these weather conditions in the background, let's take a look at the necessary gears. Very important, of course, are the footwear, given the fact that you're going to go on very rough terrain, both when on the trails as even more when you're getting off trail. Most Himalayan hikers prefer waterproof big hiking boots, which of course will be protective for the shoes. Myself being an ultra runner, having an ultra running background, I will prefer obviously a lightweight trail running shoes, which according to me have similar benefits than the boots, but have a number of advantages. One, of course, being lightweight. So for every step, for every tens of thousands of steps on a multi-week trek, you're going to pull up much less weight, which will lead to much more efficiency, less calories lost as you do a lot of elevation and a lot of climbing. Sole again, I think is pretty similar to any hiking boot, a rough abrasive sole with good lugs, so you have good grip on both hard surfaces and loose terrain, scree. And then one major benefit of at least breathable trail running shoes compared to waterproof hiking boots is that, as I mentioned, it's breathable, so it's comfortable in hot as well as humid climates. And very important, the shoe will dry very quickly after crossing streams or after getting wet as you go through rainy weather in the lower Himalayas, or you go through snow, melting snow in the high passes. It's very important to keep your shoes keep your feet ventilated and dry. Skin cannot be wet for prolonged durations, which will definitely happen if you have if water gets in a closed boot. Again, a little bit different from the average Himalayan hiker who will be packed up in several layers of jackets and warm clothing. My approach to the Himalayas as, again, a fast hiker, a minimalist fast hiker, somebody who goes very fast, climbs up fast, generates a lot of heat and transpirates a lot. Breathable clothing is essential. So lightweight, dry fit clothing will be very comfortable to let the body breathe. Will be very comfortable in both hot climates. Again, at higher altitudes, it can be very overwhelming, the heat and the UV rays of the sun, so breathable clothing is important. And again, in rainy lower Himalayas, as well as while crossing streams, clothing that dries fast will be important to keep your skin dry and comfortable. So again, obviously, this will only work as long as you're on the move, as long as your body is warm. If it becomes colder, or if you stop at the end of the day at the campsite, or as you take a break at high altitude passes, you will definitely have to layer up, as we'll see in the coming slides. As I mentioned earlier in the weather slides, cold and wetness, cold wind and rain is life-threatening, so it can cause hypothermia. As soon as you become wet, especially the upper body, I'm not too concerned about the legs or the feet or the hands or even the head. The upper body needs to be kept dry and protected from cold by all means. So a rain jacket will probably be the most important gear in your set, on your gear sets, to keep your upper body dry if you suddenly get hit by more intense rains at higher altitudes, which again gets amplified if you combine this with wind, cold wind at the same time. The opposite then, sun and heat, as I mentioned, at especially high altitude desert of Ladakh, Zanskar, Lahore, above 4,000 meters, you get exposed to intense UV radiation, more than heat, I would say. So protecting your skin is essential, especially the head, so proper head protection gear, sun protection gear, either a cap or a scarf or a bandana. The neck, the hands, the arms, arm sleeves, even a long pant can be useful to protect your skin from burning in this extreme climate. And then as soon as, even as a fast hiker, going fast, being pretty warm, even in colder weather conditions, as soon as you settle down in your campsite or take a break for either food break or whatever other purpose, it will be important to layer up quickly. So above this dry fit, breathable base layer, you can put either a fleece or a down jacket to keep yourself warm, which again can be complemented with a rain jacket to break cold wind conditions. One specific weather condition is the whiteout, which is basically a sudden thaw condition that basically, in this case here, combined with snow crossing of the Kalihini Pass, will lead to complete disorientation, and you might be likely to lose the trail unless you have the help of modern day GPS-based navigations, or the trail is clearly visible, as in this case, footsteps of horses and previous hiking parties on the same routes. The previous year, here in 2018, near the Chobia Pass, I was less lucky. Here I was kind of following a less obvious shepherd trail. It was one of the more challenging passes of the Pir Panjal. Again, made a little bit of mistake of crossing the pass too late at 4 o'clock, got stuck in a complete dense fog towards the later evening around 5 o'clock, and then basically lost the trail completely, got stuck on all sides by steep vertical drops into the valley below. So I had no other goal than to basically settle down at a pretty high altitude when weather conditions worsened. It started raining, and even worse, I lost my tent the previous day. So I had to manage myself in a pretty cool and wet night, just covered with a very small tarpaulin sheet, layered up by all whatever minimalistic clothing I was having. A couple of points on technical gears. Technical gears are mostly related to the landscape. Once you talk about snow and ice, landscapes and streams, you might need additional tools to traverse these specific terrains. Some of the most useful tools will be poles, hiking poles, an ice axe, micro spikes. I'm not going to talk about roping and technical climbs as of now. I don't have experience on that. Hiking poles will be the most diverse gear set because it basically increases the points of contact, where a human being only has 2 points of contact while standing and only 1 point of contact left while walking. This becomes obviously a problem if you go across steep terrain or very volatile, slippery terrain. So in case of snow crossings, then I talk about soft snow. You'll still be able to cut steps with your shoes in the snow. But given the fact that snow is typically on these steep inclines, with when you take a wrong step, you'll slip down, accelerate, and end up in a raging river hundreds of meters below. You definitely want to have additional stability by having 1 or 2 hiking poles to be much more safe on these crossings. Very similar situation on loose soil, landslides, basically loose rocks and wet soil, where again, 1 wrong step ends you up in a deadly situation as you fall down in the valley far below. So again, having a set of hiking poles here will be essential. Same condition again when crossing an uneven riverbed full of loose boulders combined with heavy currents, water currents, during, again, say, peak summer or during the late afternoon when the water currents are high in the glacial streams. This again combined with steeper streams or where the water level goes above the hip, you'll definitely need to have more than 1-2 points of contact while walking across these ferocious stream currents. When we talk about frozen snow or ice, then poles will not do anymore. Shoes won't be able to cut steps, so you'll need what we call an ice axe, basically a lightweight tool to cut steps in the frozen snow that will allow you to cross these frozen gullies, which you can encounter even till later in the summer, when most of the snow on the open exposed ridges is melted. You will still have these gullies which have less exposure to the midday sun and where the snow remains for longer in the season. Acclimatization. So acclimatization is important for the initial stretch, even for myself going on a long duration ultra journey of several months, several thousand kilometers. The first 1 week of initial acclimatization at higher altitudes is essential. When we say acclimatization, we talk about altitudes of 3,000 meters and above. Below that, it's less likely that you run in trouble. Above 3,000 meters, you'll have to give the body sufficient time to adjust to the much lesser oxygen-rich environments at those high altitudes. And typically, as a rule of thumb, only increase your altitude by 500 meters per day. You can either look at symptoms of high altitude sickness, or to be more sure, you can carry this little device called an oximeter, which will basically measure the amount of oxygen in your blood, and which normally will be around 80 to 90%. However, as you go to higher altitudes at a fast rates during your initial days or weeks in the Himalayas, it could drop to values below 70 and even below 60 when it becomes too dangerous and you need to drop elevation soon. Electronics and power. So my main electronic device will be the mobile phone, used for 3 different purposes. One, of course, is to carry my offline maps and do GPS-based navigation, which we'll be discussing in the later chapters. More than that, also for extensive photography, documentation through videos and photos, and then offline blogging through WordPress. So heavy use of the phone means that power management becomes very important. Obviously, you'll have to carry your chargers. I'm a OnePlus user, so I have the benefit of dash charging, high amps, 4 or 6, even 6 amps charging, which will allow me to charge my phone over a short 30-minute lunch break at the Daba. Given the fact that we have to sometimes go in remote areas, away from villages, away from power for several days, it will be important to optimize your battery use, which I typically do by switching my phone entirely in airplane mode, as you don't have any mobile signal anyway, combined with battery savings mode, which will typically, for a battery for a phone not more than 1 year old, give me 2 days of pretty heavy use through GPS, photo, the camera, and the blogging. In addition to that, I carry a pretty lightweight 250 gram 10,000 mAh power bank, which gives me another 2 to 3 charges, giving me a total power range of 5 to 6 days, which is enough even in the more remote sections of Ladakh and Zanskar. Final slide on the financials, where people not unlikely spend like 10, 15, 20,000 rupees on a single pass crossing over a week. After my initial acclimatization, covering almost a single pass every day allows me to do the same in hardly 200 rupees per day or 200 rupees per pass. As long as you're self-supported without the need for a paid guide, a paid night stay, or a paid private transport, always camping by yourself, managing your own foods, managing your own way, life becomes very cheap in the mountains. As soon as you get out of the expensive cities, in the mountains, life is cheap, cheap as people will frequently treat you on unexpected hospitality in terms of food and stay. And even a paid meal will hardly be 50 to 60 rupees. So over 4 months in the Himalayas, I hardly spent 20,000 rupees over 4 months, or 200 rupees per day, which made it's very cheap actually, like 200 rupees per pass versus 15,000 rupees, which is almost a magnitude of 50 to 100 times lesser the expense. That's it for weather and gears. So in the next chapter, I'm going to focus specifically on food and shelter, which needs a dedicated time frame. Any further questions on this module, do drop a comment on Instagram or on the video on YouTube below. All the series can be accessed on my blog, ultrajourneys.org. See you guys tomorrow.